Horse racing is all about the thrill. It's about the speed, the rush, the adrenaline, the challenge, the sound of hooves pounding the track, the sight of extreme physical exertion, the pushing of boundaries, horse and human alike. And more than anything else, it's about the money. Hi, it's Emily from Bite Size Vegan, and welcome to another Vegan Nugget. Above all else, horse racing is a business, and a multi-billion-dollar one at that. It's not for the love of the sport, and certainly not for the love of the horses. It's for the love of money. This video is the third in my series on horse ethics. In the first, we took a look at horse riding in general and the musculoskeletal damage that it causes, and in the second, took a closer look at the effects of the bit. Now, not everyone can agree on the ethical nature of horse riding itself, including many vegans, but horse racing takes the commodification of horses to a whole other level that should give even the most staunch non-vegan pause. With money as the priority, horses are treated as no more than cash machines. This so-called sport is rife with cruelty on so many levels, and I'll do my best to touch on as many of them as possible. Please reference the blog post for this video linked here and in the video description for further articles and resources. The cruelty of horse racing begins long before the track. Racehorses are genetically manipulated and bred to run as fast as possible. Their lives begin at a stud farm, where mother horses are forced to be pregnant 90% of their shortened lives through the use of drugs like prostaglandins and the alteration of their environment in order to manipulate their natural cycles. Once born, potential racehorses are ripped from their mothers, who are immediately impregnated again, until they can no longer produce foals and are sent to slaughter. Having been separated from their mothers, these newborn foals need sustenance and are nursed by what are called nurse mares, horses with a lower pedigree who are impregnated with the sole purpose of producing milk for the racehorse foals. The children of the nurse mares are of no use to the industry, and because it's illegal to send horses under the age of 6 months to slaughter, many are killed by a brutal clubbing or are simply left to starve to death. They are then skinned to produce high-end leather products known as Cordovan leather, and their meat is often sold for human consumption. A 2009 report from the Jockey Club stated that approximately 49,817 mares were bred that year, meaning approximately 49,817 byproduct nurse foals were needlessly slaughtered, and that's only in the United States. This horrific cycle of forced pregnancies, stolen children, and premature death closely mirrors the dairy industry, wherein mother cows have their calves taken at birth and slaughtered for veal so that humans may consume their milk. Unfortunately, being bred as a potential racehorse does not save the other foals from a similar fate. Out of the hundreds of thousands of potential racehorses bred in multiple countries every year, only 5 to 40% will go on to race. The remainder are either sent to slaughter for human consumption or pet food, re-entered into the breeding industry, or sold for lower-tier racing, which has even less safeguards and regulations. While the consumption of horse meat is taboo in many societies, with even regular consumers of other animal products balking at the idea of eating horses, what many people don't realize is that horse slaughter is simply the back end of horse racing. Just as the egg industry has no use for male chicks and grinds them up alive or gasses them, so too are the horses not deemed fit enough for racing discarded as industry waste. For those horses who do make the cut to race, it's just the beginning of a tortured existence. Racehorses typically begin rigorous training when they are around 1.5 years old, long before their bodies are fully developed and their skeletons mature. According to the text Practical Anatomy and Propedeutic of the Horse, the length of time for complete growth of the epithelial plates or cartilage is not until they are, on average, between 6 and 9 years old. The extreme training demands put upon these vulnerable young horses leads to a tragic preponderance of fractures and breakdowns, leaving them finished by the age of 4 to 6. This footage of a young filly in a speed trial shows the audible crack of her cannon bone as her body is pushed beyond its natural limits. These injuries, more often than not, seal a horse's fate as they are deemed too expensive and troublesome to treat. On average, 24 horses die per week on racetracks across the United States, with numbers in Australia as high as 68 a day, meaning 25,000 a year. The injuries aren't all external breaks. The demands of racing cause a large proportion of horses to bleed into their lungs and windpipe, called exercise-induced pulmonary hemorrhage, with the University of Melbourne study finding that 50% of racehorses had blood in their windpipe and 90% have blood deeper in their lungs. Their high-concentrate diet of grains also leads to gastric ulcers, with a study in the Veterinarian finding them present in 89% of horses, with many of them developing deep, bleeding ulcers just within 8 weeks of the commencement of their training. When not tossed aside as too expensive to treat, injured horses are pushed to keep racing with the aid of dangerous drugs. Pain medication can mask injury, allowing wounded horses to run harder, further endangering their lives. As many as 90% of horses that break down have pre-existing injuries. Journalist Mac Watman explains that because thoroughbreds are bred for flashy speed and to look good in the sales ring, the animal itself has become more fragile, and that to keep the horses going, they're all given Lasix, which controls bleeding in the lungs, phenylbutazone, an anti-inflammatory, and corticosteroids for pain and inflammation. Injured horses aren't the only ones drugged, however. Former public relations manager for Churchill Downs, Alex Strauss, says there are trainers pumping horses full of illegal drugs every day. With so much money on the line, people will do anything to make their horses run faster. This includes using chemicals that are made to bulk up pigs and cattle before slaughter, as well as blood doping agents, thyroid medications, stimulants, Viagra, cobra venom, and cancer drugs, among others. In addition to being chemically pushed to perform, horses are brutally whipped during races, in what is probably the most public and societally endorsed form of animal abuse today. The racing industry assures that whips must be padded and, when used properly, only stimulate a horse and do not cause pain. However, according to a study by professor and veterinarian Dr. Paul McGreevy, the padding failed to protect horses in 64% of strikes, and 83% of whip impacts showed visible indentation on the skin, with some 75% of strikes hitting the horse's flank, even though that's against the International Agreement on Breeding, Racing, and Wagering. Dr. McGreevy also found that 70% of the strikes were delivered backhanded and were thus not counted under the rules limiting the number of strikes. In many countries, the number of times a horse may be struck during a race is only limited up to the last 100 meters, at which point horses can be whipped ceaselessly. This piece of ballistic plastic, consistent with a horse's flesh, shows the impact of a standard single whip strike. Dr. McGreevy himself took this further and did a thermographic study of his own leg after delivering a standard blow to his thigh. These white areas show inflammation 30 minutes after the single blow. Whip proponents argue that horses are much larger animals and have thick skin and a higher pain tolerance. There is nothing to support this claim, and Dr. McGreevy points out that horses can feel even a single fly landing on their skin, as evidenced by the characteristic shake called the meniscus reflex. It's rather naive to assume that being beaten repeatedly with a blunt object is a pain-free experience. Racehorses are also subjected to the use of metal bits, the impact of which I've extensively detailed in this video. It's important to note, however, that the bits used in racing are even more severe than those used in equine sports. Horse whisperer Frank Bell states that racehorses have bits in their mouths pretty much their whole lives. A lot of jockeys actually balance on the horse's mouth, so often its mouth is destroyed. When off the track, horses in training are stabled for the majority of the day. This is the most practical way to store a horse. However, this isolation robs them of social and environmental stimulation. Stabled horses can develop a number of neurotic behaviors, such as crib biting, where they bite on fences and other fixed objects, as well as swaying back and forth and self-mutilation. After all of this pain and suffering, you'd think that racehorses would be rewarded in the end, especially the champions. But these animals are treated as disposable commodities, regardless of their achievements. When a horse is no longer able to perform, or his or her performance is no longer deemed adequate, he or she is tossed aside like so much garbage. Those who break down on the track are euthanized on the spot and sent off to rendering plants for pet food and byproducts, or simply dumped in a junkyard like this horse. Those who don't die or are killed on the track are sometimes downgraded to lower-level racing, like jump racing, which carries up to 20 times more fatalities than flat racing, and has far less regulations and standards. The final destination for most failed racehorses is slaughter, where captive bolts are often sloppily and ineffectively used, prolonging the painful and terrifying death of these long-abused animals. Even champions who won their owners hundreds of thousands of dollars are sold for a pittance. From cradle to grave, racehorses live tortured, terrifying, brutal, completely thankless lives. This is what happens when money is placed above the lives of sentient beings. And this is the true face of the so-called sport of kings. Thank you for watching, and please share this video around to spread the message. Give the video a thumbs up if you found it effective, and to support messages like this one, click on the Nugget Army icon and join our community over on Patreon to keep Bite Size Vegan educating. And if you're new to my channel, be sure to hit the big red subscribe button down there for more awesome vegan content every Monday, Wednesday, and some Fridays. And be sure to check out the first and second video in the Horse Ethics series. Now go live vegan, and I'll see you soon.